get by. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Johnny Page, CEO of SaaS Academy. And Johnny, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. Since we're going to be talking about SaaS all the time, some of the good SaaS interviews, one of the co-founders of Pipedrive on, they think they were on when they had 10,000 customers or so. Now they have over 100,000 customers. It was kind of a crazy story of how he moved to the US, had a brain tumor and a bunch of things all happen at once. And that was a very, very interesting and touching interview. I had Wade Foster, co-founder of Zapier. He talks about growing to over 1 million users. I don't know how many they have at this point, but probably a lot. Mailshake founder Sujan Patel talks about growing to over 70,000 customers. And then it was interesting, Johnny, that one, he was talking about how he's been buying up SaaS companies and how he onboards, after he purchases it, how he onboards the company, kind of integrates it into the company. So that was very interesting. More on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise25. At Rise25, we help businesses give to and connect to your dream relationships, partnerships. How do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. So, Johnny, you know this. We kind of are called, people call us the magic elves that run in the background to make it look easy for the hosts so they can create amazing content, create amazing relationships, and most importantly, run their business. Johnny, they have a podcast over at SaaS Academy. You could check it out. He's a huge proponent of podcasting. I saw your post today actually on LinkedIn. Said, I think people have an unfair advantage when they have a podcast because you can connect with amazing people. And I always look at ways to give to my network. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. We have a lot of free episodes about podcasting that we share, like what software to use, how to, all sorts of questions that we get. So check it out. But also big shout out and thank you to Marcel over at Parakeeto. We met because of Marcel, and we'll be talking about him because they have a book coming up, Software as a Science. He's one of the co-authors. You can check him out at Parakeeto. The predictable agency profitability is possible. That's his tagline. So love it. I'm excited to introduce Johnny Page, formerly the CEO of Silvertrac. He successfully helped build and lead that company for 7 years before a successful exit to K1 Investments. He actually started, is interesting, as a SaaS Academy client, working with the founder, Dan Martell, and the team. He started working for the company in various capacities and went on to become CEO. And SaaS Academy, Johnny will do a better job explaining it, but helps B2B SaaS founders overcome challenges and grow their business faster. And Johnny, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is gonna be fun.
Just start off, and there is a video piece. I'm going to share my screen in a second and pull up SaaS Academy, but just tell people about SaaS Academy and what you do.
Yeah. So we're a coaching and training company for B2B software founders. So purely business to business, purely founders, nothing outside of that. So not business to consumer, and also not to the VP of sales or anyone other than the founder. We have 3 programs to address companies at 3 different stages of the growth journey. So we have our entry level programs called Growth Accelerator. It's designed to help the founder get market validation on their software idea, right? So it's that first $10,000 in monthly recurring revenue. Not really, finding quite yet product market fit. That's something that will continue on through all of our programs. But this is when someone's decided to pay that first dollar and validated that there is a willingness to pay for their product. Our core program, it's SaaS Academy program, is designed for founders going between about 100K in annual revenue to 3 million in annual revenue. And this is the phase of the business where the founder is, wearing lots of different hats and then slowly installing a repeatable process into each one and taking off that hat. So they take off the customer success hat, take off the sales, the marketing hat, and start to install a leadership team and processes where the business comes out of, starts to get out of build mode and into scale mode, which is where our third program comes into place. This is for founders doing between 3 and 30 million. And this is where the founder really starts to shift from founder mode into CEO and has to reinvent their relationship with the business and with their leadership team. And so, we have about 500 clients actively enrolled in all of those programs. And I've been doing this for about 7 years now.
What was most valuable for you? You were a member, right? With Silvertrac. When you were in, this is, most valuable for me is always relationships. You've met your co-authors of this, obviously, software as a service book with, I'll pull that up in a second, but you can check it out, softwarebook.com. And your co-authors, all in the program, Marcel and Matt, you went through the program. What was most valuable for you when you think back to when you were in SaaS Academy?
Yeah, it's a combination of things, but the thing that got me in the door was the content. The frameworks really helped put a language and specificity to the challenges and the nuances I was feeling in the business. So like one of our most popular frameworks is called the Rocket Demo Builder. And it's a very simple methodology for how to do a software demo. And I had, at the time when I joined SaaS Academy, I'd probably already done 500 some demos. And there's, I could get off a call and tell you that one felt good or that one didn't, but I couldn't tell you specifically what it was that made the good ones good and the bad ones bad. Well, the Rocket Demo Builder put some language and architecture to a demo that now allows us to be a much more repeatable process. So super high impact for me, as the person wearing many hats, but it was even more impactful when I could turn around and give that to my sales team as I started to hire them and say, hey, this is a methodology that drives how we do demos here. And that's the case. I use demos as an example, but we've got over 400 playbooks all throughout our campus, from everything about how to hire and evaluate your team, how to build compensation plans, how to activate your customers in your product, whether you're enterprise product or you have a product-led motion. There are 400 playbooks for every nuance and dynamic in the business across every core function, and so that's what got me into the door. What you don't realize when you are searching is how impactful the community element's going to be. And I remember like a very specific moment. So I'm in San Luis Obispo, California. I got invited to, there's 3 events per year in SaaS Academy. We call them intensives, and got invited to an intensive in San Francisco. And I remember it was the first time that I'd really driven and, traveled for education or training, personal development. And I remember driving on the way up there feeling so nervous about just walking into that room. I felt like I knew nothing about SaaS, felt like an absolute imposter. And I remember, walking into that room, it felt very similar to like walking into a classroom the first time you changed to a new school. I was taken right back to like second grade of like, where am I going to sit? Am I going to get along with any of these people? And I remember walking in and 45 seconds in, I was like, oh, I found my tribe. Like and then for the rest of that day, where outside of SaaS Academy, if I talked about the things that were truly exciting me about, business, I had about 2 to 5 minutes until like my friends and family's eyes glazed over and it's like, okay, I lost them. I went for like 8 hours on that first day, just in both through the conversation curated through the workshops and then just all the in between, the lunches, the dinners. I just, found the people who were aspiring to do the same things that I was, and were also, worried about the same things and frustrated about the same things. And so the community was not at all on my calculus of things that were important and I was looking for, but man, it being proved to, I mean, I just, I knew from the moment that I walked in that I'd be a part of this community for a long time. I didn't know what capacity, but yeah, changed the trajectory of my life personally and professionally.
I've heard that over and over where people go, they come for the content and stay for the community type of thing. And it seems to be the case. I want to dig into what you said. And if you were watching the video, there is you can go to SaaSacademy.com and you can go to the Rocket Demo Builder actually, and they have a download there. You can check it out. But what's a big mistake you have found, maybe you made them or if you found other founders make with demos?
Yeah. Yeah, there's two main ones, and that is the first is that we give a tour of our product, not a demo. And so this can be really challenging for the founder who finds every part of their product really exciting. And you jump onto a call with a prospect and you fire hose them for 45 minutes touring every functionality and part of the product. And the reality is there's probably about 30% of your product that is absolutely mission critical, super important for the client. And then everything else is additive. But unless we nail that 30%, and communicate very clearly what their problem solved would look like, we don't earn the business. And so this is a matter of shifting from a tour to a demo. And I say all the time, we want to show them their problem solved. So as quickly as we can get to showing exactly what that new workflow would look like, and this leads to point number 2, going through the feature ask flow. So we want to demonstrate the feature. So we do a discovery on the front end. Hey, what is that 30% to you? What's absolutely mission critical? Why is this important now? Why are you on a software demo? Most people don't love the demo, software just for fun. What's the problem in the business? How's it showing up? What does the ideal solution look like? Get really clear on the front end. Then we demonstrate the feature. And we pause to ask, does this solve the problem? See, a lot of times, if you make this conversion from giving a tour to a demo, we still miss the opportunity to ask for feedback and input from the client before we move on to that part. If we want to get to the end of the call and make it an easy close, we need to pause for these, what some people call objections, throughout the conversation, right? So don't move on until we've shown, hey, we can solve problem number 1, and then we can move on and, demo feature number 2. But those are the two biggest mistakes. If you can just do that, if you don't download the Rocket Demo Builder or watch a training at all, if you just say, hey, am I giving a tour or am I demonstrating their problem solved? And then am I pausing throughout the conversation to ask for their input on, would this work for you? What do you like about it? What's missing? We get to handle those with much more time on the call than what a lot of people do is they wait to the end. They've fire hosed them for the whole call. Then we show them the price and then we ask if they want to move forward. And there's about, 13 minutes on the clock and there's about 45 minutes worth of questions. And so we just don't get as far into it as we could if we're not front loading those mission critical parts of what they're looking for.
What are some of thanks for sharing that. That's highly valuable. And again, this obviously applies to any business. I mean, we're talking about SaaS, but take any type of business and it applies. And I love how you kind of break it down, in 80-20, right? Usually there's 20% of stuff that's going to make 80% of the impact. And so focusing in on that. What are some of the biggest pain points that you have found, Johnny, of why people join or in the beginning, and maybe what were yours, why you joined from Silvertrac? Yeah.
You're typically... Most founders have hit some type of growth ceiling or plateau, and they're not really sure which lever to pull to grow. And most of them think is they just need more leads. I need more sales. So it's typically, we boil the business down into 3 main parts. You can acquire more customers every month. You can keep your customers for longer, so improving your churn rate, or you can make the average customer worth more. most people come in thinking that they need to improve their acquisition, whether it's marketing or in sales. That, hey, if we just had more revenue, we'd solve a lot of problems. We, consider that, and most of the time, 30 to 50% of the time, that is true. Revenue solves a lot of problems. But there's the other 50% of the time where there's just a really big leak in the bucket, and no matter how much we sell, unless we reduce those churn rates, we're just going to be on a treadmill of high acquisition costs, and just putting a lot of customers out into the market that didn't have a great experience with our product. And the third one is just the pricing power and how powerful that lever is. If we have a customer that's on average across our client base, they're paying $250 a month. If we can get that to $300 or $400 or even $500 a month, it dramatically changes the economics of the business. So most of the time when a founder is coming to us, they're just not sure which lever to pull. If they do have a hunch or an assumption, it is that I need more customers. We sit down, we model out the impact of, if we were to focus on one of those levers for 90 days, what impact do we think we can have? And we make a more mathematical assessment around what should we focus on. Because the reality is, if we were putting in effort every day, and most founders are like, that is a given. I'm going to work hard for this. The challenge is, if we don't focus on the bottleneck of the business, it doesn't grow. So we have this frustration around, hey, I keep on putting in the effort and just not seeing the results from it. We slow down a little bit on the front end to make sure that that's pointed in the right direction. That is oftentimes, 90 days in, with the founder focused on the most important issue in the business, we can start to push off that growth ceiling and start to see growth come back. And then we have another 270 days on their time in our program, if they're in for a year, to go continue to push the ROI. So most of the time we call it chocolate and broccoli, but people want chocolate is, hey, I want more customers. Sometimes we're like, hey, I think what you need is to work on a pricing update or an improvement in your retention. But regardless, we sit down and model it out together and then get into execution mode.
The most, for me, the most impact in my life and business is always mentorship. Being in a group and with people who have done it, have seen it, and that's kind of, I forgot, there's been founders on here who have said, you can run really fast and people are working on in the wrong direction. So it's helpful to get a group and people who have seen the trend, can, plot this stuff out. They've been there, done that. What's interesting, and what I want to talk about is, we talked about sales, one of those things, right? I think a lot of founders, or myself, sales can cure a lot of things, or at least we think it can. But you seem to be also a master salesperson. And when you went from your family had a security company, and then eventually you were talking to the Silvertrac people, you were basically, I'll let you tell the story, but kind of the original arrangement there, you had probably, 80% of their customers. What were you doing that was so successful? We'll talk about the arrangement. We'll talk about what were you doing so successful that you were able to really help them and you had a large percentage of the customers.
Yeah. So for background and for context, my family owned a security company, a physical security company. So they provided contract security services where we would train and certify security officers to then go out and work at hospitals, schools, homeowners associations, you name it. They ran that company for 40 years. So I started off with them. And the challenge in that industry is that it's hard to prove if you do great work or not, right? Most of the time you're on site when there's no other, you're watching a property or assets where they're unguarded. And so I found a tool called Silvertrac that allowed me to prove the work that we were doing and became a massive competitive advantage. Turns out it was better fit for me to be selling software and focus in that space than it was security services. So I made the transition over and I became a commission-only sales rep for Silvertrac. I was essentially a reseller agreement. So I was allowed to take the software, resell. I got 30% of the monthly recurring revenue, but I had to market, sell, and support any customers on the product. So that very quickly, I realized how infrequent, because we had no marketing presence. I mean, like when I started working on the product, this product was just coming out of, it was two brothers and a cousin that had built the product for their own security company. And they were just starting to spin it off into their own software company. So there's no website, very, very early. So I realized how infrequent it was going to be to have a demo opportunity to sell more customers. So I said, look, when I get someone, I have to make sure that I keep them around. So I've always had a more customer success focused approach to growth. And I think that really served me well in the sales conversations, because I could anticipate, I'd worked for so long. Let's say you're in a sales only role. And we agree that the more time you spend with your customer, the better you're going to get at sales. In a sales conversation, maybe I'm on a call with them for an hour, but when I'm deploying the software, I get to meet with this customer for months, and I get to understand the ins and outs of the business. I actually get to see the problem solved. So then I come back to my new conversations, and I can see sales is a transfer of enthusiasm. So the more clear I can picture the outcome, their desired outcome, their problem solved, the more compelling I am in the sales conversation. So, and I started to, early on, I'd be in slide decks. I would be worried about getting into the product and what if it throws up an error page. And then just like the more and more I got to know the product, and I've, let's say that by the time I'd onboarded 30 customers into the software, you couldn't get me onto a demo there was not a situation, maybe close rates close to 70%, when if I got on with a founder of a security company, like they were going to launch some type of proof of concept to our product, because I could just speak with such a high conviction and clarity around what the problem solved looked like. And I knew, I'd migrated customers over from every product in the space. That customer success foundation was incredibly influential, and it continues to be. If you follow the through line of my career, I sold security services. I was a customer of Silvertrac. Then I came on to run Silvertrac. Then I consumed the services at SaaS Academy, and then I came on to run SaaS Academy. So this like customer success foundation, walking a mile in the shoes of your client, there's just not for me, I've never been someone like, reading through a bunch of sales books and figuring out the verbal judo or the right way to phrase a conversation. Like I just let the work speak for itself. In my customer success time, focus on really understanding how to get them to their desired outcome as fast as possible. And then I extract value from those customers in the form of testimonials, case studies, referrals, references. So I let the body of work speak, to then fuel my sales efforts and strategy, our marketing strategy. And you can see that on our website. I mean, at SaaS Academy, we don't sit down, we don't invite our customers to an event without sitting down and then, getting them into a chair and handing them a microphone and say, hey, tell us about your time here. Like there's so many internet marketing companies out there that can claim to help founders. Like we just let the thousands of founders that have come through our program speak for the results. And so I think that's a cheat code. If you're in sales, it's harder. The later you join a company, it's harder to get that like experience in customer success. But like I take hands down someone who's been on the delivery side, and I'll teach them the sales skills, than having someone with like great sales skills and having to teach them the point of view and conviction that comes from having actually delivered on the product. At least
you can see here, if people are looking at the video, the SaaSacademy.com, or at our clients, the client stories page here, and there's a bunch of client success, there's videos and everything like that, but there's nothing that talks better to the product or service than a success story, especially if you have experienced that personally yourself. Just for people, Johnny, paint the picture a little bit. You joined Silvertrac, you're commission only. Where are you at in your life as far as wife, kids, significant other? Because it is a leap. You're like, listen, I'm commission only. I mean, you're betting on yourself here in a big way. And also you're like, this isn't an established product, so there aren't people looking for it. So you literally have to go out and hustle and get customers, which is a big, risk in some ways. What did life look like at that point?
Yeah, I was newly married, didn't have any kids yet, although that would come like within the first year my wife and I were married. She got pregnant and we had our first kid together. So I was for student loans had just kicked in. I'm paying about like $450 a month in my student loans. We are barely making like $2,000 a month with my work at the security company. And but I had seen, so the challenge was I had started using the software and I was starting to sell a lot for the security company, to the point where it was changing my grandparents' like business. They started to become, this is a lifestyle business. They've been doing it for 40 years. For the business to support my, earning desire and potential, and we just realized there was a real misalignment. And so that's where it was like, hey, let me go start looking for something else. Well, I called up the founder of Silvertrac and I said, hey man, I have this idea of a product that can help the security industry, just looking to get his point of view and perspective. And he was like, hey, like, let me show you what we're building at Silvertrac. It turned out it was really early on. So I remember sitting over the kitchen table and being like, look, all I need to get to is about 9 customers, and I'll on a recurring revenue basis, and I'll have like broken even on, so it won't be as much of a step backwards. So I worked out with my family's company. Hey, let me have this like 3-month down ramp where I'll go from, selling for you guys full time. I'll just continue to nurture what's in the pipeline. Let me ramp down over 3 months while I ramp up at Silvertrac. And it took me a lot longer to ramp up at Silvertrac. The challenge then was data. We were, our software ran on Android, and at the time there weren't even Apple phones. So Android smartphone. But the price of data was cost prohibitive to the security companies. Like it actually cut into their margin, pretty significantly. And so it was a matter of like finding people willing, having contracts that were like established enough that had high enough margins to support the product getting out. It took me a lot longer to ramp up to 9, but I just started doing like digital marketing services. Like I'd had a knack for helping grow security companies. So while I was selling the software and waiting for that to come along, I also just like got scrappy and said, hey, let me help you like refresh your website, get into some local SEO work. And so I supported on the side there, just hustling, again, serving the same target market, which I think really helped me. It wasn't like I was, helping, gym owners at the same time that I was, trying to sell the software. I found another problem that my target customer had, and continued to nurture and extract more revenue from the relationships I had, while I let my network in the security industry continue to grow. But that was around, put it by the time I became CEO of the company, I had been with them for about 4 years and had built up a customer base of about 150 or so, 180 clients. And so, was really well established. It was essentially 90% of the total customer base of the company. And, me becoming at the time I was still a contractor. So becoming an employee at that point, it was well established. My wife and I had 2 to 3 kids, and, yeah, the rest is history.
Johnny, talk about the evolution of your positions there really quickly. So you start off as commission only salesperson, right? You build up a book of business. What were the next positions that you went through with Silvertrac?
It's funny, like it's the company when we sold it had at the most 30 people, including contractors. So there were never these like formal, it was like, hey, pick your title, whatever you think, whatever you want to call yourself so that your customers, are more likely to answer the phone, like, call yourself that. So I thought the easiest thing to call myself would be, hey, I'm a VP of customer success. That helps me in the, the support conversation. And then also, speaks, I think you get by in the sales conversation as well. But there was never these like formal, hey, you're this or you're that. Like, and I say all the time, like leadership comes without a title. So I just had a really, Chris Anderson and myself. Chris was one of the 3 founders, and he's the one who brought me into the business, and incredibly supportive mentor, and just a lifelong friend throughout the process. But him and I just had this like really clear vision of what the business could grow up into be, and work side by side. So there was never like a formal, hey, now you're promoted from like salesperson to VP of customer success, or now you're promoted from VP of customer success to CEO. But, Chris and I worked together in the 7 years that I was there. We go from the market being pretty challenging from a cost perspective to sell into, to there being 5 to 6 like really established competitors and a lot of investment into the industry as a whole, to the point where Chris and I are talking, like we were misalignment between what Chris and I wanted to build and what the other two founders wanted to. The other two founders, this was more of a lifestyle business for them. They didn't really want to hire more employees, invest in the product. So we started to go through a process of a year or so, kind of thinking about what are our options. Can we buy them out? Can we partner with another company? Should we acquire another company, or is it time for us to go look for an exit? So it ended up through many different iterations and attempts to keep the business under Chris and I ended up deciding that a sale was the best decision, and took them through what ended up being a 12-month process of finding a buyer, working through due diligence and taking the company through an exit.
With SaaS Academy, again, we'll talk through some of the different positions you took on. But back to Silvertrac for a second. I know one thing that differs with SaaS Academy and Silvertrac that I think you learned from Silvertrac, and I'll let you speak to it, is as you grew up, you're like, listen, I want stake in this thing. I'm helping build this thing, and I want stake. What do you, going back to Silvertrac, what do you wish you would have done there in regards to that?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember when I was working through all those options of, can we get our, some of the partners bought out? Can we, what are all the different avenues we have? I remember talking to Dan Bartel, and he said, look, as you go through this process, I shared the concern, like, hey man, I've built this to a point where it's like pretty well established. What I'd like to have happen as a part of this is that I become an owner in the company, in some capacity. And he was like, well, you need to negotiate that first, because as soon as there's a valuation assigned to the business, your opportunity to become a founder or to become a partner will be gone. They'll know the value of whatever equity they grant you, or or you purchase. And so I was like, you know what? I didn't take his advice. I said, I trust the founders regardless. I'm going to continue doing what's best for the business. And it's not like I don't trust them now, but they did what we had agreed to. And that was that I was an employee, a well-paid one at times. And, and I did my job to do what was best for the company. In hindsight, for the amounts that I contributed, and really led the company to the outcomes that they achieved, I really wish I would have had that conversation earlier on. And so, that was, took that lesson learned, and made sure that was the first conversation that Dan and I had as I left. I was in about a year and a half worth of into my time with the company that had acquired us, and in conversations with Dan about coming over to SaaS Academy, it was the first one that I had said, hey, like, the highs and lows of my journey into ownership in a company so far. I get, I won't, the next thing I do, I will be an owner of, and at least a partner in. And so you learned that lesson, but it was a costly one to have, and one I wish that I would have taken the advice from Dan at the time when I got it.
So just an overview in the trajectory at SaaS Academy. So you start off obviously as a client customer. Then what happened next?
Yeah. So post exit, one of the ways that Dan was, he's super creative, and we've talked a lot about this on our podcast, is how he keeps his network close to him. He's like, hey, I've got a group of people I know, like at some point I'm going to look for an opportunity to work for them. So he's like, starts with people first and then looks for opportunities to work together. So one of the things that he did when founders in SaaS Academy were working through post exit is that's a totally different challenge to be working through. So SaaS Academy exists to help founders find their perfect exit. So it's very common. There's over 50 some companies now that going through our programs have gone on to sell their companies. And that earnout period, that post acquisition period it's a time when there's a lot of questions around how does the founder continue to interface in the business? What are they going to go do next? So, Dan post exit at Silvertrac said, "Hey, Johnny, why don't you stay in the community and coach on a fractional basis? Like, hey, let's figure out what are the 2 to 3 areas where you really excelled in the business, and when I have a client that has a challenge in that area, we'll just book them on to a 30-minute call. Just set aside 2 to 3 hours a week. You might have 3 or 4 phone calls, and just support founders, based on your past experience." So that's where it started. Was we had probably about 10 to 12 founders. Matt, our co-author, was one of those that exited his company within about 2 months of when I took Silvertrac through the exit. And so both him and I were coaching on a fractional basis. And that was just a way for us to stay involved in the community, stay involved with Dan. And then that evolved into about 6 months into that, I just messaged Dan and I'm like, "Hey, I'm an obsessive type of personality. I don't do anything halfway, and I can't jump on another coaching call without having it be just my full-time focus. If I'm going to do this, I want to be incredibly good at it. I don't want it just getting my leftover time." And so that conversation then evolved into, "Hey, I need some help running our customer success team. We need to now start thinking about SaaS Academy with a formal product department and then a formal customer success department. And I'd love to have you come on and run customer success." And so I started there. That was my first way into the door. And then about 4 months after that, we had some challenges in our marketing department. And I said, "Hey, Dan, I feel like I've got a really good handle on what we could be doing better there. Let me take a crack at running a marketing team." So I took that over. And then about 4 to 6 months after that, had some challenges with our sales team, scaling that, and just the sales leadership in place wasn't aligned with where we wanted to go. So I took that over, became the CRO, and then was in the CRO role for about 12 months before we started talking about what a transition into a CEO role would look like. And we had Dan and I went on a hike and talked about where we wanted our lives to be 5 years from now. What does great look like? On that hike, I share with him, I just can't imagine myself 5 years from now not being the CEO of a company. I'd love for it to be SaaS Academy, but I just can't imagine not being in the driver's seat. I feel like I spent enough time kind of being in a number 2 role. And by the time we got done with that hike and we're sitting over a cup of coffee in a coffee shop, Dan and I, mapped out what it would look like, 18 months transition into that CEO role. What would all the things have to be true? And, got to work on crossing those things off the list. And it takes us to where we're at. That was about 6 months ago. We formally announced the transition into my transition into the CEO role.
Looking at that transition, Johnny, what were some of those key points that helped with the transition? Because if you're looking at it, a founder bringing on a hardworking, capable CEO is, I don't know, it's a founder's dream, but it's definitely up there. What made that transition successful? What things did you both put in place?
Yeah, Dan just does a really good job at beginning with the end in mind. And so we said, okay, if Dan was if he was enthusiastic and excited about the CEO that was running SaaS Academy, what would that person do? How would they show up in the business? How would they interact together? What would he go on to do? So, he did that exercise. I did that exercise. And we created this Google Doc with all of the things that there was almost like a gap analysis. It's like, okay, if that's what it looks like, where are we at today? And just through a series of our one-on-ones and, several months, we would just kind of take one of those pieces at a time and start to close that gap. It's interesting that I have always been in any role, and the part of the transitions that led even up to that point. I'm not someone that waits for Dan or for anyone else to say, "Hey, this is an area for development." I'm thinking like a founder and like a owner of the business from day one that I show up. So there was nothing on Dan's list that I wasn't like, "Yeah, I 100% agree. That's an area I'd love to get a lot closer to." Or, are already doing and, or, had a desire to do. And so, by the time with the announcement into the CEO transition was probably about 6 to 12 months after it effectively took place inside the building. And so I just think that that's a blueprint for a lot of people, whether you are the founder looking to hire CEO to get yourself out of the day to day, or you're a number two in an organization and would love to be running it. The blueprint is you got to be thinking and showing up like that person already. Like it wasn't a far stretch for Dan to imagine me running the company, and it wasn't a far stretch for me to imagine, closing the gap of what Dan expected out of someone in this role. And so, I think that the beginning with the end in mind was a really important step of getting really clear expectations, and then just a meeting cadence throughout the process to measure progress along that. And you always there's this difference between, hey, we set the goal, and then as you start to take steps down that, you almost try it on, and you say, hey, does this feel right? There's a whole bunch that could have gone wrong. Or that, where I could have said, hey, I don't think this is right for me. And there's a whole lot that Dan could have been like, you know what, I'm not ready to step out of the business and have you take the reins. But you set a direction, and then, set a meeting cadence to allow us to routinely come back to say, how's it going? That, I think set us both up to be successful.
No, thanks for sharing that. That's really helpful to hear. I do want to talk about books, right? Some of your favorite books. If you're looking at the video, we have Software as a Science. We'll definitely talk about Software as a Science. Also talk about Buy Back Your Time. I remember I was chatting with Jason Swank, and he was recommending it to everyone he knew. And I think he even bought it for a bunch of people too. So what are some of your favorite books business-wise? And then I want to talk about Software as a Science.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of my favorite books, gosh, I think one of the most impactful first ones that I read was Adopting the Rockefeller Habits by Vern Harnish, which then led me to Scaling Up. I love Jim Collins' books. Those are incredible. In the SaaS space, I think Extreme Revenue Growth and The Great CEO Within are two of the ones that I find myself recurring all the time to founders we work with. Extreme Revenue Growth is by Victor Chang, and then The Great CEO Within by Matt Mashari. Those are foundational, almost like required reading. At least once the founder is starting to shift past that $3 million mark and into scaling and CEOing the company, those are really helpful books. But man, there's dozens and dozens of books that have helped. Dan uses this term all the time, like built by books. I mean, that is SaaS Academy, are both our curriculum, our program, the partners in it, all built by books and those that have gone before us and shared the knowledge, which is part of why we put the time and effort in to go do the same and to give back and to get all that we've learned over the last 7 years in running SaaS Academy into a book that we could share with the world.
So Software as a Science, unlock limitless recurring revenue without losing control. What's one of your favorite stories from the book?
Oh man. I think one of my favorite is, and it's fun because I joined the program at the same time. I remember Chris and his brother started a company called Trainual, and Chris and I were in SaaS Academy at the same time. In fact, we did this fun thing where at our intensives, existing clients in the program would go up on stage and teach a 10-minute tactic. And I remember Chris and I both taught at the same intensive back to back. And he taught how he was using zero interest credit cards to fund their customer acquisition because they could get their cash back in less than 60 days. So he didn't have to, it was essentially 0% financing their growth. And we actually ended up, he used that single methodology. At the time he had gone from 20 to about 55K. It taught the tactic in SaaS Academy. He would go on to use that single channel to drive their growth north of 2 million. And now extremely successful, well-established company, and a fun, we'll commonly go back through SaaS Academy's campus and see Chris or myself or Marcel or Matt as students in that room. So fun to have that footage and story, but I think that's one of my favorites in there. It's, it shows the concept of a lot of times it is easy, especially with digital marketing today, to feel like you've got to be doing everything. You got to have a podcast, you got to be running paid ads, you got to have SEO. And it's that's what we illustrate with Chris's story is the need to be super disciplined and focused on one channel and one funnel, and how far it can get you into the business before you start to diversify markets or marketing channels. So yeah, I think that's one of my favorites.
Do you have another one you look back on? 10-minute talk. What was another fan favorite 10-minute talk?
It's funny, like that same intensive, we had Matt Prados from a company called ReviewWave, which is now, they're doing north of 30 million. They made multiple acquisitions. The three of us went back to back to back. And there are certainly, you can kind of think we do 3 intensives a year, so that's 3 batches of 4 founders that teach. I think that one's probably got the most like exits and revenue under our belt. More than any other, but that was another one. He taught a really interesting methodology of them using trade shows to be their primary acquisition, which is uncommon in SaaS. I mean, there's well-established SaaS companies will use it as a channel. It's typically not the first. And Matt had a really awesome strategy for growth, all fueled on almost like a guerrilla marketing approach to going to trade shows.
It's funny, Johnny, you mentioned Matt because I'm a recovering chiropractor. And I remember Matt, he served the chiropractic niche. And I'm like, who's this guy? And he was obviously early on into the internet scene, just, doing more innovative things. So I heard of Matt decades ago.
Yeah.
When he was serving the chiropractic market. I don't know if he still is. Maybe that's part of his, part of ReviewWave's client base. But
Yeah.
what, I know you have co-authors here with Marcel, yourself, Dan Martell, and Matt. Maybe talk about their contribution. What's another part of the book, maybe that wasn't your piece, but either Matt, Marcel, or Dan's piece that sticks out?
Yeah. So the cool thing is this book is a distillation of our best trainings in SaaS Academy, the top playbook. So what we introduced in the book is this concept of what we use to figure out what's the bottleneck in the business. We call it the growth ceiling. And it allows us to take those 4 metrics. How many customers do you have today? How many new customers are you getting on a monthly basis? What's your monthly churn? And what's the average customer worth to you? And show on a graph at the point when your business will hit the growth ceiling. And then we take so that's the first 2 chapters of the book. There's 3 sections to the remaining part of the book that focus on each one of those levers. So how do we acquire more customers? What are the best playbooks and trainings that we've had from putting over 3,000 founders through our programs? What is the most effective when it comes to getting new customers? The second section of the book goes through what are our most effective strategies for reducing your churn. And the last one is the strategies for increasing the average revenue per account, or what a customer is worth to you. So it was a challenging, but also very rewarding process to have 4 authors as a part of the book. You could imagine, all of us have worked hand in hand with customers and seen these methodologies. We agreed on the macro, right? But the micro of what stories get highlighted, and as you start to put it into a book that feels very final, everything we've done up until this point has been a series of like YouTube videos and training in our campus, which is easy to go in and update and change if we have a change in our point of view. The book is going to live forever, whether we have multiple versions of it or not. When we go publish this to the world, it is going to have an evergreen element to it. And so I'll tell you, like, Matt was the quarterback of this process, the person that kind of took all 4 of our point of views and boiled it down to kind of get like, what is version 1 on the board that we can then go through an editing process. And he was just incredibly influential. Dan created the version 1 of many of these methodologies. Marcel and I have both built on them in our time working with clients, but it's a bit a fun process. I'm glad now I can call it fun because we are done with 2 years of writing the book. It was very challenging to have 4 authors, but I'm glad we decided to do it the way we did, because you got the best of all of our point of views, having, we've got a 360 view of this challenge, and between us, thousands of repetitions of seeing these playbooks implemented in SaaS companies.
I'm not surprised when you say that, because when I was looking at Matt's bio as COO of SaaS Academy, so I visualize him making sure all the visionaries kind of wrangling them all and making sure everything happens. So, the last question I have, first of all, Johnny, thank you. People can check out softwarebook.com to learn more. You can get the book. I'm sure it's going to be wherever, if you want to go get it on Audible or, any of the, on Amazon or anywhere else you can get it, but you can check out softwarebook.com. They're going to have some bonuses, I believe, in like the audio version. Also, you can check out saasacademy.com. If you know of a B2B SaaS founder, send this interview to them and tell them to check out SaaS Academy. The last question is about, I don't know which story would be better. I know Mark Abbott or Kyle from Proposify, and just tell their story a little bit so that, the audience can get some lessons from what they went through.
Yeah, I think that, we've had the pleasure of, we've had some of the most successful and well-known founders come through our programs. And there are people, I say all the time, the winners are going to win. So, Mark and Kyle and Chris and, many of the founders that have come through our programs are going to win regardless, like whether they are in our program or not. We help accelerate it. But the thing that's most meaningful is when they say, look, I've stuck around because of the community that I get from this. Like there's nowhere else on the planet that I can go, 3 times per year, get together in person. And then when I have questions, drop it into our Slack community, or connect with other founders and have that shared experience and support. So to be at a place where guys like Kyle and like Mark and like Chris continue to be a part of the SaaS Academy community and use it as a sounding board, no matter what level of success that they reach in their business, to me says a lot. We are very much results focused, but there's a relationship foundation to a lot of what we do. And, guys like that continue to be a part of our community. It, makes me super proud. And it's something we continue to double down on as we pursue this mission of creating more value for SaaS founders than anyone else in the world.
Is there a takeaway from, I don't know, maybe from the community that Mark Abbott got or Kyle from Proposify or anyone else that would be instructive? Like what were one of the takeaways that they got that helped
improve? I think one of the
business?
ones we hear most. So those are both guys that spend the majority of their time in our programs in our high-end mastermind. And at that point, they've been through multiple rounds of fundraising. They've considered acquisitions or exits. And those are not conversations. Like you don't get redos on those. They're extremely high leverage and high consequence conversations. So when you are considering, fundraising or you are in the process of pursuing an exit, to be around a community of people that have done it before, those are commonly like, hey, that paid for all of my time in SaaS Academy and then some, because of the conversations like I mentioned that I had with you. I got the advice, hey, if you want to get equity in the company, you better have that conversation before this valuation. Unfortunately, in my case, it didn't end up creating the ROI. I got the advice, I didn't apply it. But
you used Dan's advice with Dan. So it's,
yes, exactly. It paid off in the long run. But I think those are the conversations that when we sit down and ask about, hey, or when they share, we use them commonly as references, is to say, why join SaaS Academy? Those are the conversations that you really want to have a strong network around. And unfortunately, by the time you need it, if you haven't built that network, it's hard to have it. Like you really want to be investing in that early on and just say, look, for me to become the founder and build the business that I want, I know that I'm going to be plugged into a community of people that have been where I want to go.
Johnny, one of the first one to thank you. Everyone check out softwarebook.com, saasacademy.com, and we'll see everyone next time. Johnny, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like $100 grand.